All right, so now that's pretty well cleaned up. No more filthy grease everywhere and dust buildup. I think that's a considerable improvement over where it was, especially back here in the swing arm area. Just takes time to make a bike look near new once again. You just got to clean out all that grease, oil buildup, all that sand that gets collected and all the nooks and crannies. It makes a huge difference. Front valve cover was covered in fork oil deposits and just collected dirt from there. So now that's looking almost new. The next thing we're going to do is the valve check and adjustment, which means pulling out these coil packs, pulling off the valve covers, and then checking the openers and closers on each set of valves. So let's get to it. Right now I'm measuring the openers. Now I'm measuring the closers, and I'm putting the feeler gauge that is 1 greater than the upper limit. Doesn't fit in that one, doesn't fit in that one. But it fits very easily through there. So these two are very out of spec, coming in at 0.152 millimeters. All right, so I've taken my measurements of both the horizontal and vertical cylinders, and let's check out the results here. So overall, there are 5 valves that are out of spec. None of them are wildly out of spec, but they do mean we're gonna have to pull out the camshafts and replace some shims. So on the vertical cylinder head, we have 2 closers that are basically 1 step size out of spec, and then we have on the horizontal cylinder head 2 openers that are basically 0.03 millimeters out of spec, so not crazy out of spec, but they are a little small on the gaps. And then 1 closer that is out of spec there as well. So I'm happy to see at least we're dealing with mainly valves that have a gap that's too big on the closers, and the openers just are a little bit too small. When you see clearances that are just barely out of spec like this, you can never really be sure if the mechanic doing the work is actually going to get it back into spec. They might call this good to go because it's pretty close. This is one benefit of doing your own work, because you can definitely get it right every time and know that it's done right. It just takes a bit more time. Let's get to it. Just a word of caution before you start pulling cams out and removing shims and removing closer shims and all that. You want to make sure the piston you're doing work on is in the top of its stroke. So this horizontal cylinder is, and I know that because I've put a 1/4 inch extension in there, and I can feel the top of the piston right there, and I know that's at the top of its stroke because I put a little marker on here telling me when it's at the bottom of its stroke. So when we get to the vertical cylinder head, we will have to rotate the engine about 180 degrees before we start pulling everything apart. The reason you want to do this is because once you pull off the closer shim, the potential for the valve to fall down into the cylinder are very high, and there's no guarantee you'll be able to retrieve that valve when it does fall without the piston being at the top of its stroke. It might have fallen down in the combustion chamber and you cannot retrieve it, which would be very, very bad. That's the valves adjusted. Now it's time to put the new timing belts on. So the specifications 110 hertz plus or minus 5, so that is actually within spec. All right, 109, that's within spec. Those are the timing belts fitted now. Now it's time to swap out the old spark plugs for new.